In this week's drive, we follow a supercar on the road to launch, build a virtual Formula One car, start up a living legend, and terminate some less than legendary wrecks. All this and more in this week's Drive. When the Formula One cars take to the track to do battle, only a few of the team which built them are still involved. For many of the engineers, what's on the track is old news. They're busy with improvements or even a whole new car. About 200,000 individual items are designed and manufactured by the team every year.
Of course, there are no standard tires for Formula One cars. Instead, they're permanently being developed. And it's just that, development, that costs so much. To subsequently produce or put together individual components is not cheap, but it's not unduly expensive. The expensive part is development, and above all, permanent, ongoing development. Not only in wind tunnels, but also in other areas as well.
New parts, better designs, different materials. The engineers are constantly looking for any improvement, big or small, that can make the cars faster than the competition. But they're not standing still either. By the end of the season, the car is completely new. Let's see, the carbon fiber monocoque is one of a few parts that remains unchanged. The car's suspension, a carbon fiber mix, light but strong enough to withstand 300 km/h bumps. Small but highly effective springs and shock absorbers made of super light space-age metals you might find in a shuttle or a jet fighter. These are changed to suit each track. The rear suspension is also carbon fiber. The carbon brake discs are designed to last for exactly one race, then they're replaced. The aluminium brake calipers also won't last for any great distance. The rear wings and their supports need to be strong, light and adjustable to suit different tracks, changing conditions and the driver's requirements. The car's nose is aerodynamically critical. Attached to it, the complex front wing, the most important single component in the handling package, different for every track. The top-secret diffuser speeds up airflow beneath the car and creates downforce. Small wings and flaps on the chassis evolve during the season. True consumables, wheels and tires. So that's why Formula One cars cost so much. They're constantly being replaced with new, improved parts in the relentless quest for speed.
So we have an awful lot of our staff are dedicated to developing the car, to apply new technologies, to working obviously within the regulations to come up with the best design of car. And we're always looking to push the boundaries of technology to do things just that little bit better than our competitors. So, yeah, we really stretch developments, and I think we adopt new technologies very quickly compared to road car. We have to be a little bit more conservative if you're building cars in volume.
Road car manufacturers may be more conservative, but they need to stay ahead of their rivals too. Research and development comes ahead of constant improvement. But there has to be durability and cost-effectiveness with the capability for mass production too. Throughout a production car's model life, subtle improvements are made, and it's widely believed that the last cars to roll off the production line are the best of that model that will ever be made.
During its time in production, every model is continually developed. Development reflects lessons learned in practice, and analysis is also made of what's learned from crash tests, such as those at the Allianz Center for Technology. Potential improvements include airbag release mechanisms, or strengthening work in relation to parts involved in the crash tests.
What works in theory must also be tested in practice. If it works, it gets used again and again, and the industry often uses the same platform for various models. Even in Formula One, there's talk of standard brakes and other components to cut costs.
For us here, it's a question of psychology. We're used to designing everything ourselves, setting our own standards, hoping they're better, engineering standards than anybody else, and having a total grip on whether we're winners or not having it decided by the abilities of outside suppliers. However, if we have to move with the times, we'll then take a view whether that route suits us or another.
So each car evolves constantly, becoming more than just the sum of its many very special parts, with top-secret designs, high-tech materials and futuristic technology, all being refined on a daily basis. No wonder the designers, engineers and technicians are looking beyond what happens on race day. Modern racing cars are very much safer than they used to be. 30 years ago, drivers stood a very much higher chance of dying on the track. But thanks to some far-sighted people, the tracks on which we race and the cars we drive became much safer. Even so, something can always go wrong, but the area beside the track has received lots of attention too. Trees and buildings have been replaced with gravel arrestor beds, or at least barriers and walls. Where solid walls are used, stacks of old car tires provide a cushion for anyone who might hit it.
At the start of the 70s, people started to think what actually happens when a car goes into a spin. Does it really have to smash into pieces in a copse of trees or fly into the spectators, or can we do something to prevent that? Since that time, the racetracks have consistently been developed further, in parallel to the cars themselves, with some developments which didn't work particularly well. But in the meantime, we're now able to use the latest scientific findings to brake the Formula One cars if something goes wrong, so that the impact is lessened and the drivers have the greatest possible chance.
A Grand Prix track is made safe with a variety of options depending on circumstances. Sometimes it's a run-off zone with gravel traps to slow or stop the cars from high speed, or crash barriers with tyre stacks, and sometimes, like at Indianapolis, solid concrete walls have to be used to give the necessary protection. Crash barriers are used when they're likely to be hit at a fairly square angle. They can absorb a huge impact and they're anchored solidly. Depending on what's likely to hit them, they're often set up in 2 or 3 tiers to stop a car or parts of it going beyond the barrier. If there's not much space alongside the track, as at many oval tracks, or if spectators, marshals or other personnel must be protected, only a solid wall, like on most pit lanes, will do. The advantage is that the object is thrown back onto the track at the same angle, and usually at nearly the same speed. Sudden deceleration can be a killer too. Rigid walls don't absorb much impact, so they're often used in combination with tyre stacks, which dampen the impact. In the case of so-called air walls, a type of shock absorber is positioned in front of the wall, often in combination with narrow gravel traps and barriers. Racing has become much safer. The cars are stronger and the driver has more time to slow down before he hits anything solid. The old wire mesh fences that trap drivers in burning cars are gone too.
The development of the racetracks has definitely been positive. The runoff zones have been modified, the curbs have been changed, and the designers make sure that the cars cannot collide with rigid objects like crash barriers or walls at a broad angle. At present, the trend is away from the gravel trap and towards asphalt. In normal circumstances, when you have all 4 wheels on the ground, that's a good thing, because you just spin and then you carry on. But I'm not so sure about it when something goes wrong, but we'll have to wait and see.
Sand or gravel traps often don't work very well if they're wet. Cars tend to skip over them, and sometimes canny drivers are able to drive through them and return to the track, where they'd normally be stuck in the sand. But if there's not enough space, walls or crash barriers must provide protection, and it's no different for normal road traffic.
The same applies in Formula One and in normal traffic. The best barrier is no barrier, because then a vehicle can run off without any danger. However, the situation's completely different as soon as obstacles are involved. For example, trees. A third of all fatalities are caused by collisions with obstacles, so suitable protective measures are very important. One possibility for providing protection is crash barriers, or even concrete protective walls. Concrete walls are particularly effective when the angle of impact is very acute, and the vehicle can slide along the wall.
To get where you're going, you need to stay off the walls, the barriers, and out of the sand traps. And to finish first, racing drivers must first finish. Almost a year ago, McLaren Formula One driver David Coulthard had one of the more unusual assignments of his jet-set life. He was tasked with driving a prototype of the world's most desirable sports car incredibly slowly. It was the early part of a feature film being made following the car's progress from the factory floor to its eventual launch at the Frankfurt Motor Show. Although it bears the legendary Mercedes-Benz model designation SLR, the new car is in almost every respect a product of the McLaren factory in the UK, which also builds David's everyday office, the McLaren Formula One. McLaren engines come from Mercedes-Benz, and the German giant collaborated with the factory in the design and construction of the new supercar. They also provide the 5.4-litre supercharged V8 engine. The original SLR was made famous by Stirling Moss, and the now Sir Stirling joined David for the next instalment in the movie. A modern interpretation of some of the styling elements from the original 300 SLR and from the latest Formula One cars links past and future, bringing cutting-edge design to the road, just as the legendary SLR Uhlenhout Coupe did in 1955. Moss, probably the greatest driver never to win the world title, was a Formula One Mercedes Works driver in the 1950s, and he regularly attends functions as a VIP guest of the factory. Then it was on to David's backyard and the roads used for the Monaco Grand Prix for a bit of profiling, and still more photography, with a production-ready version of the still unreleased new car. 10 years ago, McLaren worked with its then engine supplier BMW to build the awesome McLaren F1 three-seater road car using a 6.1-litre V12 engine. The new car celebrates the marque's Formula One connections and promotes interest in the Mercedes brand, but at the same time it's an amazing piece of engineering. A roadside statue commemorates another great Mercedes driver, the late Juan Manuel Fangio. David's film star looks and the exotic new car quickly attracted a knot of admiring tourists. Locals would never be seen staring. The next stage was filmed in an airship manufacturing hangar. David plays the part of a test driver of a top-secret new model, obliged to return the fantastic car to its makers. The SLR will hit 100 kilometers an hour from rest in 3.8 seconds with a top speed of more than 320 kilometers an hour from 450 kilowatts, but the 760 newton meters of torque will make it hard to beat, figuratively and literally. Stopping the car is equally quick thanks to ceramic brake discs and an innovative air brake mounted in the boot lid. When the driver hits the brakes hard, the air brake pops up at a 65-degree angle, increasing drag and providing greater downforce.
And action. Yeah, in a space, okay, yeah, I can do that. Then it just let me practice.
The next step was at the Frankfurt show, where David's teammate Kimi Räikkönen and test driver Alexander Wurz presented the new machine. The motoring press would actually get to drive the new car 3 months later in Cape Town. Mercedes and McLaren have indicated that 500 SLRs will be delivered to customers starting in late 2004. Certainly the order book is a list of the world's celebrities, rich and famous. At the other end of the motoring world, the latest version of the Vespa scooter, an old-time favourite in Europe, is being launched onto the American market. The new model is the first new release in 7 years. The Gran Turismo is the biggest, fastest, most powerful and most advanced Vespa the company has ever produced. Powered by a 20-horsepower, 4-stroke, liquid-cooled 200cc engine, the scooter tops out at 74 miles an hour. Unlike the traditional two-stroke engine, the new motor exceeds stringent Californian emissions requirements. And as for its appeal to US consumers, Piaggio executives believe it is a challenge that they can face.
The tougher mission that we have is to try to convince US American that they can have a different way to commute. Usually the American, they are thinking about cars, they are thinking about bicycles, they are thinking about underground. So we need to convince those people that they can have another way to commute. It can be Vespa.
The Vespa has been a familiar sight on the streets of Europe for nearly 50 years. It remains virtually unchanged in design since its heyday in the 50s and 60s. Since then, it has zoomed alongside other Italian motoring icons such as Ferrari and Alfa Romeo. The latest Vespa scooter will be available in 3 fashion accessory colours: steel grey, black and vintage green. Manufacturers say the Gran Turismo's new engine will offer riding pleasure with a combination of style, speed and the lowest levels of air and noise pollution, something they hope will win the hearts of millions of Americans. Vespa executives are hoping to sell 30 or 40,000 of the new scooters into the US market. Scooters are the fastest growing segment of the US two-wheeled market, with an increase of 533% between 1998 and 2002, according to the Motorcycle Industry Council. Some of New York's best-known celebrities are Vespa riders, including actors Jerry Seinfeld, Robert De Niro, Matthew Broderick and Sarah Jessica Parker. An electronic anti-theft immobilizer system is so effective that starting it without a key is impossible. Under the seat, there's room for 2 open-face helmets, with more room in an optional colour-matched top case with padded passenger backrest. It also has 12-inch wheels and 2 disc brakes, a first for Vespa. The scooter will come at a hefty suggested retail price, when it's available in America in February, of $4,900. The Gran Turismo was launched onto the European market last March. More motoring excellence, but from another age. The Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost, built in 1912 and still going strong. This car has been lovingly cared for over almost a century. The Ghost, more accurately the 4050, got its name from its engine, a technological marvel of the time, combining quietness with efficiency. The first owner kept it for 35 years, and now it's for sale.
People associated refinement with quietness, and the pinnacle of quietness was the Silver Ghost. The Ghost name is the quietness of it, and literally a 6-cylinder car, very, very well engineered, and they said that it would have the sense of wafting through the countryside.
Over 6,000 Ghosts were built in England between 1907 and 1925. In addition, another 1,700 cars were built in America between 1921 and 26. This particular car was photographed and appeared in the company's 1913 sales catalogue. It's in extremely original condition and has been maintained perfectly. 90 years ago, it cost £4,000, but at auction recently, it fetched £368,000, plus tax. This Honda NSX won its class and came 8th overall in the 95 Le Mans 24-hour. It has carbon fibre body panels, a 400 horsepower engine, racing gearbox and brakes with BMW Formula One ABS. Including a supply of parts, it sold for £115,000. Potentially more valuable is this 7-litre Italian Bizzarini racer from 1965. Neglected for 30 years, it failed to sell.
The concept is fantastic. The centre of gravity is very low. The engine, the fuel cell, the gearbox are all firmly within the wheelbase of the car. Sleek aerodynamics, a lot of power. It's easily achievable.
This Austin Princess hearse carried Britain's wartime Prime Minister, Sir Winston Churchill, at his funeral in January 1965. Now, in a sad condition, it fetched £5,800. And now, an auction of motoring exotica on a slightly smaller scale. 2,000 model Porsches went under the hammer in an auction of toy memorabilia. Packed in boxes ready for viewing, the Porsches are amongst 600 lots. The cars range from resin models to those made of metal and date from the 1950s to the present.
For somebody with that extra bit of cash who's paid a bit of mortgage off, wants a bit of heritage, or they might own a car or dream of owning a car, and a Porsche is an ideal thing to collect.
The models range in type from on-road Porsches to whole sets of racing versions, and they were made available for viewing ahead of the sale. For collectors, the prestige of the Porsche marque makes it the luxury item they want to have.
It's always a dream car. It doesn't matter if you're a young boy or if you're or a gentleman or a lady. They're all interested in Porsches, and a Porsche is a dream car to have.
The collection is almost a series of snapshots of the history of Porsche, from the days when policemen drove 911s and including many of the cars which have appeared in competition around the world, such as in the Turbo Cup and the Monte Carlo Rally. Not sure about those skis though.
It's a big investment, purely because in a year or two's time the collecting market is going up and up all the time, and it's probably going to go up another 10 to 15% each year.
Because the brand has enjoyed superstar celebrity status for over 40 years, almost every model, from humble single-seaters to the mighty long-tailed 917 Le Mans racers, from the almost Volkswagens to the definitive 911 turbos, are guaranteed collectible. Prices range from £50 to £300, coming from over 1,000 bidders. A profitable hobby or a real investment opportunity? Race preparation is always a last-minute thing. Sometimes the highly paid technicians do it, and sometimes the drivers do it themselves. Some merely need to polish, others do more robust stuff, like grinding.
It's definitely not all the building of the cars and all the bashing. I think it's just the adrenaline you get when you're out there, smashing into things and getting them out of the way and hitting the other cars. Just the general buzz of it, really.
Around the world, there's different names for the same things: demolition derbies, crash fests, or as they call it in the UK, banger racing. And 43 cars and 25 laps later, the banger racing champion will be crowned.
I think a great deal is down to your car prep. Obviously, it's down to driver skill. But as with any form of motorsport, from Formula 1 to this, luck always plays its part.
It's all bang and crash, and that's what people come for. Expect to put cotton in your ears if you stand close to the track of the 2003 Banger Racing Championships. Open to unlimited over 1800cc bangers, this year's championships drew the biggest names from the banger racing world to compete for the prestigious title, even if some of them wore floppy pink flower pots.
There's time and places for going rodding and trying to win, but you're known in the sport for crashing, and I do believe that's what I'm here for.
Most of the drivers had staked their claim for the final by winning races throughout the season, but 2 preliminary races were the gateway for the last 2 drivers to qualify for the final. Pride was at stake in this ultimate challenge, and the cars were presented with freshly completed paintwork, yet none would leave the arena unscathed. This is full-contact racing. The atmosphere was as close as a modern audience will come to that of a Roman gladiator event, as the armoured warriors did battle under the arc lights of a stadium. The crowd roared their approval as metal clashed and smoke billowed from the early casualties. In this race, it's an achievement to finish as much as gaining top honours.
It means a lot, really, because you race all year to get here, basically, and this is the one you want to win, and I finally won it.
Dave strips cars for a living. Defending champ Mark Simmons had to be content with second place. So, whether you're up for a $1 million sports car, a racer with a pedigree, or something more humble, so you stay on track and up to speed, make sure you catch next week's Drive.